I have to make this stuff up. I mean, when I read about a private in the National Guard in Maine having access to super secret documents sharing on the internet, I was thinking, what is going on? So,
And apparently he printed these documents out on an office printer and kind of crumpled them up and stuck them in his pockets and then went home and took pictures of them. I mean, what the hell's going on here?
yep, sounds like an ex-president that we know, but we won't go into that. We're not talking about that guy. We're talking about the guy in Maine. So we got Dan Lorman, who's had so many titles I've lost track. Has a bunch of letters after his name. I forget what they all mean. And then Richard Steenan, old buddy of mine. Excuse me, a longtime buddy of mine. I always get in trouble when I use the word old. Who we worked together for a long time. Worked with all these guys for a long time. Someone explained to me how a 21-year-old private in Maine got hold of national defense secrets.
I have to defer to Dan because it's his agency that has to defend those things.
Hey guys, great to be with you again, Mike and Matt and Richard, of course. It really is a mystery, and just say the investigation is ongoing. But the more I read about this, the more appalled I am. It does seem, almost, beyond a movie even. Of course, I don't think a movie script.
No, I would have never come up with this plot. This one,
I mean, you really wouldn't, because you usually think of it as being 007 snuck in with billions of dollars from
or Tom Cruise has to hang from the ceiling and stuff.
Jumping off of cliffs and everything else to get the data. But this guy looks like he walked out the front door with it. How he did it. I mean, maybe we should just start with what we know. I mean, there's a lot of really good articles out right now. Reportedly, Jack Teixeira, a 21-year-old low-level National Guard member assigned to the intelligence squadron in Massachusetts, allegedly removed hundreds of classified documents from his office and was sharing them. And, we can walk through, what it meant that he used it. They had a group called Discord. They were using a service called Discord where they were sharing things amongst friends. Supposedly they had an agreement they would keep it quiet, and people started leaking it onto the web via Twitter and other areas. It got out. But I mean, the thing that I think that I'd love to hear Richard's view on this, but the thing that appalled me, I think it shocked me the most, was the breadth of the materials that affected so many areas of the Department of Defense and foreign relations, relationships with our allies around the world. The scope and the breadth and depth of this is really astounding. And it's been, you can't go on the internet, just type in data leak and 28 articles will pop right up. It's really unbelievable. And, we could talk about the impact, but this, it seems to be on the level of Snowden, or, it takes us back a decade or more. And it really, I think the impact to the intelligence community and to our U.S. Defense is really unknown at this time. It could be really, really bad, but love to hear Richard's opening thoughts.
Yeah, when you talk about insider threats, quite often we imagine, somebody who's been hired as a spy, or somebody's, working for China or for Russia, and they've got a mission, right? They have to collect certain things or collect anything you see, which is what this young man actually did. But the motivations are completely different than, any of the recent cases, including Snowden. His motivations seem to be bragging rights in a room full of kind of
look at me, I have access to super secret intelligence. 21-year-olds, what can you expect, right? But I mean,
and it seemed like, and it also seems like he was the elder statesman of the group. Most of them were teenagers,
right,
from what I've read. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and he's, we probably all, as you dig into rabbit holes on the internet, you encounter groups like this, quite often gun focused, right? And everybody's an expert. They all know all the intimate details of how latch mechanisms work and all that stuff. And it seemed to be that kind of group that he's in. And, nothing like building up your profile by saying, oh, yeah, well, look at this. the war in Ukraine, here are all these top secret, no foreign documents that I'm sharing with you. And just astounding, but it raises, to me, I always think of it from the security perspective. It's like, how in the world can you stop an insider threat? And when that insider threat is one of the 3 million people who work inside the Defense Department and one of the 1 million who have top secret clearance, you just can't monitor them all, right?
Well, and I think guys, I will tell you, and I won't go into too many details, but and it was a long time ago, but when I was in the intelligence community, NSA, and then Lockheed and MITech in the 90s in England, I don't see how something like this could happen in the areas that I was in, because they did searches, I mean, there's a will, there's a way. I mean, obviously we had Hansen, we have examples of where there have been major insider threat breaches, and absolutely that is the case, and I'm sure there's others that we don't even know about, so I'm not questioning that, but this seems more like literally somebody who was not funded by millions of dollars of foreign intelligence services. It wasn't somebody who intricately had in Snowden, for all of his again, good, bad, ugly. There were different people who have different views of Snowden. He had a philosophical view of what he was trying to get done. He believed that the intelligence community was going way beyond the scope of their duties, and he did this over. If you watch the movies, you read the books. He was able to trick over 25 people to give up their access. He did a lot of social engineering to get access. It was a lot of different databases over a long period of time. And it was, clearly it was huge damage. And we're still playing that out as well a decade later. But this was nothing like that. This was kind of a guy who loaded stuff up in his backpack and walked out the front door. I mean, it was... I don't see how it was done either. It seems like a complete breach of security procedures to me, and like a lack of oversight.
So what is the intelligence? I mean, this has got to be a real black eye for the intelligence community.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you guys are professionals. What would be your first steps to tighten things up?
I'll start, Richard, jump in. I mean, it's access. How did this guy have access to all of this information? I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, he had a job where he had to do X, Y, Z. Okay, so maybe he's reviewing some aspect of some gun situation or some, ammunition in, the front lines of Ukraine, or I don't know what he was looking at. That's one thing. But how someone at that level and that low level person had access to the reports that were going to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the high level, literally the global assessments and some very, very, very broad and deep, really not just classified but compartmented information that is very, very specific. Why he needed the need to know wasn't there. I just do not see the need to know, and so it's really enforcing the rules they already have. So I mean, you're going to have to limit the scope dramatically of who has access to what. And even Snowden, if you go back and read the stories, and he didn't have access to all the things that he was able to ultimately compromise, but he was able to trick people into getting that access. This according to what I'm reading, this is only like a week in, they arrested the guy last week, but they're saying that he had legitimate access to all of these different reports, which just doesn't seem, possible to me. I mean, it seems crazy, but Richard, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I envision, whenever you see a movie where the intelligence agencies are reviewing critical documents, they hand them all out, they're stamped top secret. There's a bunch of people around the sides of the room who are there as aides, right? And one of them has the job of making sure the room is clean when everybody leaves. I get the feeling that this young man was that person. In other words, he was part of the solution, the controls, make sure that, people don't leave stuff lying out. So gather it all up and return it to its proper place or destroy it. That gave him complete access to random things. That's why it's so spread out, depending on the group that he was working with that was, having regular meetings and discussing all these top secret things. So I think that the blowback or repercussions internally are going to be tightening up those controls, right? They have to have that, if there are documents left, the person who's responsible for cleaning them up has to, check out when they leave the room, that kind of thing. And there'll be a whole lot of that going on. Because, Dan and I worry about protecting things when they're on computers all the time, but eventually they end up in these printed reports. And after that, it's really hard to track them.
Yeah, and I wonder about the government's response to this too, whether there was a bit of cosplay going on here, maybe, because it looked like they sent an entire friggin' National Guard platoon in to arrest the guy when it was a skinny 21-year-old kid and his mom. I mean, come on. It seemed like a couple of squad cars would have been sufficient, but maybe not. I don't know. So
well, he had guns. He had guns. So maybe they were worried he was gonna. Yeah. He was. Maybe they. I don't know. Maybe they were worried he was, barricading himself. And it was going to be some kind of, martyr that was going to go down shooting or something. I don't know that. I don't know that part, but.
Can't be too careful.
Boy, is he going to be behind bars for a long time because they're going to make an example of him. I am sure, right?
Yeah. There'll be no leniency. There never is in these cases. They prosecute to the full extent of the law.
I would say this on that before we leave the topic, Mike, is I found it interesting. I guess he's being initially charged, and maybe he'll be charged with lots more later. It was 2 felonies that were like 15 years in jail each. He was not being charged with, espionage or,
right.
Because a lot of the ones that carry life imprisonment and all, the ones that are more severe than the charges that were lobbied against him require motive, an intent to harm the United States of America. And it appears, and again, this is very early days, so all of this is, subject to reports that we're getting third hand. I'm not involved in the investigation of this person, so I don't know what's happening with the FBI or others, Department of Justice behind closed doors. But it appears that, his motives were just kind of like you said, bragging rights, and or just, do it because you can do it and just argue about it on social media and, oh yeah, look at this kind of thing. So it's interesting that we're back to that discussion around motives and did you intend to harm the United States? And that's in a lot of our laws, around espionage especially. And, was it accidental? Was it incidental? Was it intentional? What was your motive? And back to the motive question, I think that's going to be a big thing we're going to be talking about over the next 12 months.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say the just for laughs defense, maybe, or something. What do you think?
The 21-year-old stupid guy defense, so
right.
Medical professionals say the brain doesn't really mature until you're 24 or 25. I think we got that here now. So
the thing is, sure. what we don't know, and this is again, I'm not connecting these dots. I'm not saying this is going to be the case, but it's possible that he was getting paid by somebody in Eastern Europe or something. I mean, we don't know that. I mean, yeah. We don't. The reporting right now is not saying that. It's saying it's just bragging to his friends. But they're also saying there was a lot of interest in follow-up questions that were coming from Eastern Europe. So I don't know, if there's going to be another smoking gun that's going to show up.
I'm really, like I said, I don't think I could think up a screenplay like that. It just never occurred to me.
Or if you
it would be that easy,
If you did, no one would buy it.
That's true. They'd all say, I could never have. Come on.
You need a couple 007s in there somewhere,
or something. Yeah. So
your cover today is going to be an idiot. So we're going to just pretend that you're really stupid.
Got that covered.
Oh, that's good. Okay. That's good. I like it.
Yeah, I was doing my homework on the back of the top secret documents or something. I was bringing it home to do my homework.
How'd that get there?
So, Dan, did you get a beret when you were in France or not? If you do, put it on right now. I want to see it. So
I did not actually, but I will tell you that it was an amazing event that we can share the link with everyone. I got back about a week and a half ago now. I had a chance to visit FIC, which I had never heard about before until they invited me to come and speak at it's a international cybersecurity forum. It's actually a forum on international cybersecurity in English. But it's an event that's been happening for 15 years now in France, brings together 60 countries. The latest edition of this was 19,000 people attending, and 60 countries involved. So it was all over the world. It's the largest cybersecurity event in Europe. And it was fascinating. The conversation, actually, the session that I was involved in was a keynote panel on, the title was Cloud Security, Pie in the Sky, ? Can we have real security in the cloud, which is a very interesting debate. But I found it fascinating for a number of reasons. You can read the whole blog at GovTech. We'll post the link. But I found it really interesting. A lot of the dynamics going on. In a lot of areas, you say, Dan, that we're in a global internet. We all know that. And the challenges can be the same in Europe that they are in the United States. Certainly, we're all facing NATO attacks based on the Ukrainian war. What's going on with Russia and Ukraine? We're all facing attacks by ransomware. All the different things we've talked about many times on this show. At the same time, there's another whole trend going on in France and Europe that's unique. And it's kind of like, I heard this in several of the sessions leading up to the one I was in, and others talking to people really around, that they're feeling a little bit, I say inferiority, but it's a feeling of, you got Google, you've got Amazon Web Services, AWS, you've got Microsoft, the big three cloud providers. And they're like, one of the sessions was around, can France create an equivalent to one of those three? So there's this attitude of like, of course, they want their data to stay in the EC. They don't want to be housed in the United States. Who's reading the email, that kind of thing. This announcements about these data breaches were coming out at the same time. So there's a whole challenge around, you got all these different things going on, and you got their president, Macron, going to China and meeting with Xi and talking about, Europe can have a special arrangement with China. How's that going to work with the United States? So you've got a lot of these cross currents that are really hitting at the same time. I'd love to hear Richard's thoughts on this, but, we're working together in NATO. We're working together in cybercrime. A great session I heard, probably one of the best ones I've ever seen. They had people from the UK, from South Korea, from Europe, a couple from the United States talking about online predators and how we can work together around child exploitation online and international partnerships to solve cybercrime. These are really important topics that I found fascinating. The discussion was really, really good. Multilingual, French, English, headsets and everything. Really, really amazing. At the same time, a lot of competition and co-opetition, working together, but also fighting each other. So it's really an interesting dynamic right now in Europe around cybersecurity.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your introducing us to that conference. I, like you, had never heard of it before. And of course, you hear about a conference when somebody reaches out and invites you to speak at it. I think, and it sounds a little bit like, there is an InfoSec Europe conference that's always held in London, but post-Brexit, there's probably a little bit, hey, we need our own, or need to support our own conference here in France. I've made a big deal because I try and track the entire industry, right? And quite often you'll hear CISOs and pundits saying there's too many vendors. We don't need the 3,350 that I track. And I go, oh, but wait a minute. There's, first of all, the tendency is to buy local. That's just kind of a natural tendency. It's like, hey, we're going to go to, if we're in France, we're going to go to a French developer of firewalls before we go to Fortinet or Cisco or somebody. And that, we were talking about Snowden before. Snowden's responsible for that in an odd way. He revealed that the U.S. government, the NSA in particular, works with those tech giants, asks them politely or demands with these secret letters that they give them certain data on international communications, which has created distrust in U.S. companies. So it's actually doing us a disservice. At the same time, you have the U.S. government for over a decade now has been trying to instill distrust of China in the market. They say, whoa, you really can't buy anything from Huawei because that's a Chinese telecom equipment provider. So if they had their equipment in all of our telecom systems, they could spy on everything. So you shouldn't use them at all. So just pure there's a risk, or there's a possibility, or they imply that it's already happening. And yet there's zero evidence, other than the evidence that Snowden revealed, that the NSA had backdoors that they inserted in Huawei gear. Anyway, long way of saying that distrust has generated what I call digital mercantilism, where every country, especially in Europe, has that distrust. Germany, France, Spain, and they want to develop their own technology. Now, as a caveat, I always tell people, well, would you rather have China or the NSA spying on your communications, or would you rather have your own law enforcement agencies who can come break down your door and arrest you spying on your communication? And that's why we're kind of ambivalent here in the US about the NSA's capturing of data, because they're legally barred from using that data and they shouldn't collect it in the first place. But in Germany and France and Europe, no, their local law enforcement can spy on them and collect data and use it against them.
Yeah.
How did it go down that rabbit hole? Off of a French conference.
Yeah, Macron, he's shades of de Gaulle, huh? But we won't go into that. So
very independent. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, guys, I just add one other thing, and before we go on, this group, and Richard, get ready for an invite, because I'm going to try and get you invited. They want me to moderate some sessions in Montreal. They're having this FIC is in Montreal in October, and then they're coming to Texas, first time ever, next June. So in 12 months, you heard it here first. It's going to be a big conference in Texas. They want to grow it in the U.S. as well. So it is a different format. We could talk about it in future shows, but it really is. There's a lot of similarities to RSA. Obviously RSA is the biggest. It's not as big as RSA, but it is a kind of a European version of that. But there's a lot of differences too. I found that some of the things they do are really unique, which I found really refreshing. So I look forward to getting more involved with this whole international conversation via the FIC.
Speaking of segues to RSA, you just made one. So that's coming up next week, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So what's the big buzz out? Well, obviously, our first story is going to be the big buzz out there. But beyond that, what do you think is going to be the big topics to talk about?
Richard?
Well, first of all, we all try and predict beforehand, and it sure feels like zero trust will be the talk of the show. It felt like that until all of a sudden the advent of ChatGPT. Now, I'm predicting that we'll hear that from practically every vendor who shows up. There's close to 500 vendors that are going to be exhibiting, and they're just rolling out one by one. And Microsoft beat everybody to the punch. They said they are incorporating this conversational ability with your threat data. So you can, ask it questions about, hey, how was this incident related to that thing that happened yesterday, and connect the dots for me. That's what artificial intelligence is supposed to be good at doing. And Microsoft's introducing that in their security copilot. But 3 other vendors have already announced, who are kind of in the same space, security analytics and threat hunting, have announced their capabilities to do that. We've done it in our own product. We've got a product for exploring a database of cybersecurity vendors, and we're getting ready to flip the button and flip the switch and allow our users to query all of our data. It's phenomenal. It's so cool that it can just work.
And it's only been since November, because when it first came out, I wasn't even sure what they were talking about. And now it's everywhere. Everybody's jumping on board. Yeah. And I'm getting all these horror stories that I'm getting. People send me a lot of stuff. So I've been reading about this, that this is going to be like Terminator, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come from the future and come back in office all or something. I don't know what to believe anymore. What do y'all think? Think this is scary? We should be worried about this?
Mike, because you and I met during the .com boom, and I was so enthralled with that. I burned my previous career as a engineer in the automotive industry to the ground. I just immediately shifted to the internet when that came about. So in 92, I started RustNet. This is bigger than the internet. This is a bigger change to the way we work in our lives than the introduction of the internet is. So yes, there's going to be a whole bunch of downside, just as there is with the internet. But this is when the Mike Brennans, Richard Steenans, Matt Rouches of the world, younger ones,
I beg your pardon, but go ahead.
Yeah, I understand. Yep, I perfectly understood.
I actually, I haven't produced it yet, but I did a 6 or 7 part video interview with the AI professor at the U of M. And that was obviously my first question, because that was in everybody's mind. Are we creating this monster that's going to end up destroying humanity? And he kind of went through it step by step, and hopefully I'll get that out in the next few weeks.
Good.
Well, he's not as concerned, but I'm scared to death. I mean, and the idea of putting a freeze on it, yeah, we can put a freeze on it, but Russia and China sure won't put a freeze on it, right? That'd be stupid on our part. Yeah. But I don't know where this is going, but I don't think it bodes well for humanity. What happens when something gets smarter than us and says, I don't need these people anymore? That is a possibility, right?
I just think I got to hop here, guys, in a minute, but I just want to throw in. I certainly agree. AI and machine learning, augmented, all pixie dust around AI is going to be everywhere. I think that is going to steal the show at RSA. I in the more near term, whether that happens in 20 years or not, Mike, I'm not going to comment on that right now. But I would just say, from my point of view, I think there's also a lot of hype around this too. And so sorting through, while I think a lot of it is great, and Rich, you just gave some great examples, if you can control the data sets. I did a piece a few weeks back, we can come back and talk about this more, but where, I was asking it lots of questions, ChatGPT that is, and it was like 0 for 7 on correct answers. It was kind of crowdsourcing the information, said the book that I wrote was written in 2014 by some general I never heard of. I mean, and
plagiarism. That's what it was. Plagiarism, right, Dan?
And then it said, the good news was when I was querying it, it told me, oh, but you wrote all these other books that I didn't write. So it was like, it was not real intelligent. I mean, it was, I don't know where it was getting its information from, but it was not accurate. So I also think working through the fake news piece of this, I mean, and I know, Richard, you're talking about specific data sets on your data. I think it is game changing. I think it's bigger than the internet. I think it's going to be new versions are going to be great over the coming decade. But I also think there's going to be a lot of disappointment in the next 12 months. And final thought is it's going to be used against us in attacks. So the bad guys are going to get a hold of this. And from social media attacks and different ways, social engineering,
deep fakes and all that,
going to happen. So yeah, Thanks, guys.
I know you got to run. Thanks for being with us, Dan.
Thank you all.
Yeah, and we had a similar thing. We had a campus discussion on LTU a couple of weeks ago about artificial intelligence, and one of the professors here of architecture and design said he tried to use it for research to bring me up the last 50 articles on this and this, and the thing fabricated articles. Yep. He said it was authors he had heard of in publications he had heard of, but when he double checked the sites, none of them existed.
Yep.
Out of 50, none of them existed. So it's still got a ways to go before it's Skynet, I think. But what we were talking about, the capability for deep fakes and social engineering, I think that's the really scary part.
Yeah. There's been a huge shift. ChatGPT was run off of version 3.5. The GPT-4 that's out now, those who have access to it are showing remarkable results. Just you can prove that it's reasoning somehow, and we don't understand how.
We don't know how. Yeah, that was the other thing that was said at this conference. GPT-4 scored in the 90th percentile on a state bar exam. GPT 3.5 was in the 10th percentile, and we don't know how it got so much better so quickly.
Nope. We just don't know.
Aliens. I think it's the aliens are doing that. So
okay.
UFOs, all them UFOs we've been hearing about, right?
That's it.